Hello and welcome to BizQuik. I'm Corey.
And I'm Julie.
And on today's show, we have Corey Berrier, a business sales coach out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome, Corey.
That's right. You're listening to BizQuik. This is where Julie and Corey provide quick and useful information to small business owners. BizQuik is the podcast where small business owners get to showcase their businesses and receive expert advice and guidance in areas many entrepreneurs struggle with. And you, the listener, get solutions, tips, and tricks on real-world topics that many small business owners face. Julie and Corey are the experts small businesses hire when they need solutions. And the BizQuik podcast is just one way they deliver those solutions. Let's start the show.
Hey, Corey, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's interesting times that we're going through, which I'm sure most people say that. Yeah, so it's super. I hope we will never see a time like this again.
Yeah, I think everybody can agree on that. So let's get into your business because you started recently and the pandemic's actually helped your business. Do you mind just kind of telling us a little bit what you do and what your year's been like?
Sure. So I am a business and sales coach, and I have been coaching I've been coaching for close to, 15 years in different areas, right? So for a long time, I coached in the health and fitness space, but more recently, I have stepped into coaching small to medium-sized businesses and the actual business owner. So there's two parts to it. I either work with an individual to get better, right, at whatever it is he feels like he's lacking in the sales side of things, or maybe it's a culture thing. And that's often tied into sales, right? So if you've got a great company, you've got a great product, but your culture is and your culture's not broken, so to speak, or you have no culture. You guys may be shocked, but a lot of companies don't have a culture, and that breeds I just lost the word, but incongruency is what it does. It breeds incongruency. If the business owner is preaching core values and we need to all do things by this way, but the business owner's not there all the time, then, the employees sometimes, I wouldn't say go rogue, but they just get lax on those core values. And if the owner believes that the core values are what's being executed throughout his team, and he continues to act on that, then maybe he's talking to a customer or a client, and maybe he says, I'm really glad that, aren't you glad that we have a core value that's going the extra mile? And they're like, well, your guy came here and tracked mud through my house and didn't clean anything up. So I don't know how you could say that. You see where there could be some incongruency there?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about how the pandemic has affected your business.
Okay, so for me, what I did going into the pandemic, I was not doing, I really wasn't, I didn't have a lot of one-on-one clients. And part of that is maybe due to the cancellation because of the pandemic, right? I mean, people, if you hire a coach, typically you're into personal development, one, or two, you have excess cash to get better. Well, a coach is usually, depending on, I suppose, what kind of coach you are, could be the first person to go. And so what my experience with this is that I had to figure out during this time how to catapult my business into the world that we live in as we speak, right? And that world is via Zoom, you're not knocking on doors. Not that I was knocking on doors, but you're not going to people's place of business. You're not, there's so many limitations. And quite frankly, with Zoom, I mean, that's what I've used forever. I do go into businesses if they're local and coach whoever it is I'm working with, whether it be the team or the entrepreneur. But obviously that stopped. And so part of what has changed for me is I realized that I didn't have someone in my corner that would propel me to get better like I do other people. And so what I did is I went all in on a super expensive coach, and not super expensive in the terms of because he was a big name, because he's not at all. The value was there. And the reason I point that portion out is because it wasn't necessarily that he was any smarter than me. It wasn't that he had more experience than me, but he knew what I needed to do to get my business in order. And so essentially what happened is, I hired this guy and he helped me essentially book $35,000 within 6 weeks during all of this. So for me, it gave me some time to think. And here's the other part to that is I also went and I did 2 ayahuasca journeys. And for the listeners that maybe they don't know about ayahuasca, it's an Amazonian tea that typically you would go to Peru, or you would go somewhere up in the middle of the forest and you drink this really nasty tea. It's about a shot glass full. And what it does is it taps into the pineal gland and it I guess it produces DMT. I may not be saying that exactly right. I don't know all the science behind it, but it taps into the DMT into your brain, and it's so hard to explain. So I'll jump forward. Instead of trying to explain to you about the medicine, because I can't really explain that part, I can just tell you what it did for me. The first time that I went down, the one thing that I distinctly remember is I was on all fours and I was throwing my guts up, which is very normal in this scenario. And I was looking around and wondering why I was the only one not either floundering around or throwing up or crying or laughing. I just didn't understand why I felt like I was kind of normal and everybody else wasn't. Well, what I realized in that moment was I compare myself to everybody around me. And I believe, because it showed me that I compare myself with everybody around me, is something that has held me back. And I've always done that. And just to give you a quick example, is once I got back from the experience, I was mowing the front lawn with my dad, with the lawnmower that my dad gave me when we moved into our house 5 years ago. And what I realized in that moment was that I've always compared myself to him at my age. So I'm 42, and I look at when he was 42, and he's always been more successful than me. So I've unconsciously not had a super close relationship with my dad. I have a good relationship, great relationship, but it could have been a lot better if I didn't have that, I guess that, I don't know if it was a fear, if it was just I don't really know what you'd call it, a roadblock, if you will.
So do you think that, first off, congratulations on discovering that, you've got this thing where you were comparing yourself, because that's going to be a little bit of a weight lifted, knowing now that you can, when you catch yourself doing it, you can kind of pull yourself back and work your own plan and whatnot. Do you think a lot of people are in a similar situation and can learn from your experience?
You mean, do I think that they should go through the experience? Is that what you mean?
Well, no, I think you're more like in terms of like just reflecting and like, figuring yourself out. Obviously, ayahuasca helps, but
right. Yes. The ayahuasca helps.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yes, I do believe that. If you look around now and you see, and I don't know where you all fall with the mask, but maybe it's you walk into a store and maybe you see me who I don't have a mask on, and maybe you judge or you think, well, why doesn't he have a mask, or whatever the case may be, right? And so here's the other part to the second journey of ayahuasca that I think is very, very, very important to this conversation, is that the second time around, I realized that the first time around, I tried to control the medicine. I wanted it to do what I wanted it to do. and not what the medicine will potentially give you what you can go for a reason, right? X, Y, or Z to find myself, to read whatever. But the medicine doesn't necessarily give you what you want, but it gives you what you need. And lots of times, at least my experience has shown that it's not always super, super clear. But here was the second defining moment for me, is that it said, I realized that I didn't value myself enough to ask for a higher price, right? I didn't value myself to charge people what I'm worth. And that may sound egotistical, but this is coming from a place that I assumed everybody knows what I do about sales. And the fact is that they don't. And when I realized the value portion here, when I was during this experience, I didn't really realize exactly what it was trying to tell me. But because of the success that I've had since then, I absolutely understand what it was trying to show.
Hey everyone, we wanted to tell you about our latest course, Foundation 52, that will be available on February 15th. This course is built to provide tools and techniques every week of the year and is designed to improve your small business. If you're thinking about starting a business, this is a great resource for you as well. We walk you through sales, customer service, disaster planning, growth strategies, and so much more. Head on over to SB Pace to sign up today.
So Corey, is there anything that you have learned from this particular experience that has given you insight into your previous business? So you had mentioned before we started recording that you had a business several years back that had failed. If you knew then what you know now because of this experience, would it have helped keep that business going?
Dude, that's such a great answer, first and foremost. Yes, it would have. And let me explain a little bit about what happened in my previous business. I went into business with a guy that didn't know anything about the business we were going into. And he had the money, or he had most of the money, and I had the knowledge, or at least that's what I thought. I thought I knew more than I did. And I went so I opened a testosterone replacement center. Right, we worked basically a med spa. We had laser hair removal and Botox and testosterone, blah 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 blah. I thought this was the end all be all. Like, I loved what I was doing. Here's where I failed as the business owner: is I let him handle the finances. And so what happened was, after our first year in business, he came to me almost to the day, and he said, "I'm not paying you anymore." And I couldn't even comprehend what he was saying, because how could he not pay me anymore? I'm the only person that ran the business. He didn't do anything in the business at all. He was a construction guy. Like, he certainly didn't know how to run a med spa. And so what happened was I didn't realize, but we were $350,000 in debt. And you probably ask, well, how the hell do you not realize that, Corey? Well, because I let him handle all the books. Our bookkeeper, right, that did the books for his construction company. Well, it's two different animals. So one thing that I learned is, don't go into business with somebody if you don't really know everything, one. And two, dude, you've got to be aware of everything that's going on in the business. And I'm not saying you got to wear every single hat in the business, but you need to at least know what your P&L is every month, right? You need to be able to look at that. And I would ask for those things and get them every now and then. And from what I could tell, being inexperienced at looking at P&Ls at the time, I didn't really know. From what I could see, it was just on a month-to-month basis. I didn't have an accruing 6 month, 8 month, 9. I didn't have that. I just had, on the month of May, we did this or we did that, right? We either lost money or we didn't lose money. And all intents and purposes, I didn't think we were losing that much money.
Yeah, and that's, such an important lesson just in general with a lot of business owners, especially when it comes to finances. People, they don't really grasp what's going on in their business, and they throw their head in their sand type thing. Just hope that it's going to go away. So after you found out that you weren't going to get paid anymore, I'm assuming the store probably closed not too long after.
Well, this is where the story really gets interesting. So To answer your question, no, it did not close. I stayed around until the 15th of October thinking maybe he was having a bad day. I'm not really sure what happened. And I was thinking he was going to pull his head out of the sand, so to speak. And he didn't. So on the night of the 15th, then I took 49% of what was mine. And of course, I consulted an attorney and all that stuff before I did any of this. And so they walked in to a rude awakening, needless to say, because, well, they didn't know what happened. They certainly didn't think I was going to do that. And so you can only imagine the call I got after that, and the various calls, and then attorneys. And so we had to go through a lawsuit, and he sued me and all these things. And at the end of the day, I wasn't in the wrong. I owned half the company, period. And my attorney drew up the documents for our partnership. So I knew I was okay. And so we went through, the courts and returning the stuff and all the things that you could imagine would go along with that, the stress. And here's, I think, where I realized my part in this whole thing. And it really wasn't about the finances, right? I mean, it was and it wasn't. Were we in debt? Yes. But really what had happened is I was so egotistical and so I'm the boss that I wasn't a good leader. I was a boss. I was not the guy you want to work. I wasn't a tyrant, but at the end of the day, like, I just wanted what I wanted, and that was it. And so, on October 1st, when I found this out initially, I was supposed to buy my ticket to go see Tony Robbins, and I had visualized about it. I journaled about it. I knew I was going. And what broke my heart about him not paying me that day is I couldn't buy the ticket. And I mean, I was crushed. I'm not gonna lie to you. And my wife made a deal, or called into Robbins Research Institute, I think is what he calls it, and told him the story about what happened. And they gave her a pretty significant discount on a ticket. And she called me at work, and I think it was probably October 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere in that vicinity. And she said, I need you to go to your computer and sit down. And I was agitated. You can only imagine. And because I didn't know what she wanted, and I was in the middle of something. And so I sat down, and she said, I need you to check your email. And when I checked it, and I saw that not only she had sent me the information from Robbins Research, the girl from Robbins Research had also emailed me. And, this is the part of the story that breaks me up, because nobody's ever, I don't think I've ever had anybody do anything like that for me before in my life. And I've gotten pretty good about telling the story without shedding a tear, but I got to tell you, it was just an important day. And it was such a nice thing for her to do, knowing that I didn't have an income coming in. And she just knew that I needed that. And it was there that I realized that I was the chokehold on the business, that I was the reason that it didn't go well. It didn't really have to do with the finances. It had to do with how I ran the business and the way that I handled my employees. And not that I was a bad person. I just tried to control everything. And back to the kind of the first of, we were talking about the ayahuasca thing, I didn't have enough insight to realize that until I went to that event and he said something, and it just hit home. And I'm like, God knows, like that's me. That was me.
Wow.
And yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. And it's nice to hear stories that are so meaningful to guests that they still have a hard time telling them. Everybody has a story like that. So thank you for opening up about that. And I want to tie it a little bit to, that importance of, so, you had this business and you didn't recognize that you were essentially, you were the roadblock, you were the problem with the business, and it took you a significant event for that to happen. And I think there's probably a lot of people right now in a position where they don't realize that they are their own roadblocks, that they're, it's easy to blame someone else. And we live in a society that really, right now, you are rewarded for being the victim. Andy Frisella talks about it all the time, right? Victims get rewarded right now. So how has removing or identifying that you were the roadblock for your business, how has that changed your life?
Because I own my own shit now. I own when I make a mistake. I think sometimes I own it when I don't make the mistake. Just because I've got that, maybe it's, the habit that I've created for years. But you're right. Listen, right now, especially if you think about the business owners and what they're going through and how their businesses are being crushed by what some people think is a pandemic, what some people think not, it doesn't really matter what you think. At the end of the day, businesses are still being crushed because of it. And, if you put yourself in the guy's shoes that maybe didn't have that much reserves, and then he got the PPP loan and it floated him until now, right? But things haven't gotten a ton better since the PPP loans came through, and maybe now he's drying up, and the stress alone from that the stress of losing your business, your family, your house, maybe you've got kids, that can take a toll on a business owner. And lots of times I think, or maybe not lots, but I know there are people that take that out on, like you said, kind of like the victim mentality. Why me? To take that out on everybody around them. And I got to tell you, you know what? I've been down that path, and it doesn't end well. And if you're struggling in business right now, and it doesn't look like you're going to survive this, the last thing you need to do is create enemies inside your own company. And if anything, and I can say this because I'm not the one getting crushed, right? And so, but you got to think about that, because your employees, if you have employees, they're getting crushed too, right along with you. And they're suffering just like you are, because guess what? Their reality looks a lot like your reality. It may not have the zeros behind it, but at the end of the day, they still don't have maybe a job that they don't know if the company's going down. And if you're acting like, a crazy person, that may be a direct indication that something's going south in the business. And you got to think about that, because your actions, the way you speak, and the way you talk to people can make a massive difference, good or bad.
It really does. I mean, that's great advice there. And since you've gone, you've had some hardships, and a lot of people are probably experiencing, some of the problems that you went through a couple of years ago. Do you have any advice, like anything that people should kind of, focus on or work on to, get through the tough times?
I would say, depending on what the business is, here's what I think is cool about this whole thing, right? If there's anything cool about it, I would say this is one of them. It's interesting how, all the schools closed down, right? And now you see teachers not teaching over Zoom or in the classroom, if that's permitted. And they're going and they're contacting maybe 4 or 5 families that they know that have a child of approximately the same age. And maybe it's people in their class. I don't know how they're contacting them, but they're taking school and the kids are coming to them and they're teaching 5 or 6 kids a day. I don't know what they're charging, but I'm sure they're making more than they were as a teacher. So that's a great example of what somebody could do and take this thing and turn it around, right? Here's another one. Emily actually said this on a call. I don't know how long ago it was, but it was a while. It was several months ago. And she said, you know, I have and the reason this hit home is my wife is a wedding photographer. And, you know, Emily said, well, you know, I have a photographer friend that's through their FaceTime on their phone, they're walking people through the process of taking pictures. And now I don't know how it's working. I don't know but I thought that was pretty interesting, right? Because that's really outside of the box.
It is. Yeah, it is. And for our listeners, he's talking about Emily Frisilla, Andy's wife. Yeah. So is there, I guess that the key then is to look for the pivots for small business owners, to find ways to pivot so that they can shift the way they're making money, but still be able to make money.
Yes, I agree. And then here's another thing. I took out a small loan to make sure that I could move my business in the direction that I needed it to move. And I've got to be honest, it was really one of the smartest things that I did, because it gave me funds it gave me enough funds to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I had not taken that step, right? And so if you're thinking about trying to save your business, or you're thinking about how to pivot, maybe an opportunity to do that is to hire somebody. I'm not saying hire me, hire somebody that can maybe assess what's going on in your business and give you some ideas of things that you could do differently. Because, you know, business owners are usually the smartest guys in the room, right? Some business owners, but not all. And so if you think you're the smartest guy in the room, well, then you're probably not going to look for help. And if you don't look for help, guess what? You're going to be the smartest guy in the room without a business. So I would say don't be so smart not to ask for help, because even if you don't know anything about my business, you could see how I carry on a call. And I'm sure either one of you could say, hey, you could have done this a little bit differently and it probably been better, right? And that's just an outside perspective. Sometimes we need that.
Yeah, that's really true. And speaking of asking for help, we got to start wrapping up right now. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you, can you tell us how they would contact you?
Yes, just at Corey Berrier, and that's spelled with an E. So it's COREYBERRIER. And then at salesceo.co is the website that I'm having built. There is a landing page there now, but the first one's all social channels and the other one's the website.
Great.
Perfect. And we'll put all that in the show notes for the listeners.
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. My pleasure. I hope this was good.
Well, if you want to connect with us, you can reach us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can reach us on our websites, sbpace.com and bizquickpodcast.com.
Yeah, and absolutely subscribe to our podcast while you're out there. Like us and give us a review.
And if you want to learn about anything in particular, you can reach out about topics you want to cover that we could cover for you. Or if you want to be a guest, let us know. And we also have a #1 bestseller book out there on Amazon, Seriously Now What? A Small Business Guide to Disaster Preparedness. And there is a companion digital workbook available as well.
Yeah. I'm Julie.
And I'm Corey.
And this was BizQuik, helping small businesses across America.